Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In his lecture, What is Metaphysics?, Martin Heidegger is going to talk about the human being, or as he's calling it, Dasein, being there, literally in German, as being held out into the nothing. And this is connected with what he calls transcendence. And this is really at the very core of the essay itself and Heidegger's thought as a totality, particularly as it pertains to human being and our relationship with the totality of being and beings. So what is Heidegger talking about? I'm going to actually make it a little bit more complicated by quoting something that he says a little bit later on after introducing this theme. He tells us that the human being is actually what he calls the lieutenant of the nothing. That is, if you think about what lieutenant means, the placeholder, the one who holds on to the lieu, the spot, the one who stands in place of, the one who acts as the agent of, the nothing. And so why is this the case? Well, because the nothing isn't anything. We are something. We are a being within the whole or the totality of beings, but we are also a particular kind of being for whom the other beings are disclosed, and they are disclosed because of the nothing, particularly through what he's calling the original mood of anxiety. So he tells us that being held out into the nothing as Dasein is on the ground of concealed anxiety makes human being a lieutenant of the nothing. He also tells us something about what he calls our finitude. That is the fact that we are indeed finite beings. We are not the totality of being. We don't encompass the totality of being. We are finite beings. We have existence in a particular place, time, culture, certain ways. We will eventually die. We cannot do everything. So he says, we are so finite, we cannot even bring ourselves originally before the nothing through our own decision and will. It's something that gets disclosed to us. So profoundly does finitude entrench itself in existence that our most proper and deepest limitation refuses to yield to our freedom. Now, you notice that he uses that term freedom there. We are indeed free. And how is it that we have freedom? This goes back again to this being held out into the nothing. And he tells us that is what Dasein means. So this is a key thing. Dasein literally does mean being there. And it's used in German idiomatically to also mean existence or a thing that exists, right? So being there. Being where? Well, there is a possibility within the totality of beings, because it's not as if there's just beings all in some sort of primordial soup or something like that. No, we live in a structured existence. There's up, there's down. I'm in front of the chalkboard. And now it's not just about being spatially located either. I am in front of this thing that I write upon before the camera that is allowing you to see me. All of those are part of a very small part, like who knows how tiny, right, of the totality of beings. And we can move from this. I can go off camera. I'm already breaking, as we call it, the fourth wall, right, in addressing you. We can go on and on and on with examples of this. And that is something that we do need to acknowledge it is true. It is real. There's this entire world environing us that we belong to, that we interact with. But there's more. What's the more? Nothing more. There's literally nothing outside of the boundaries of the world. There is nothing outside of the boundaries of the world, or nothings outside of the boundaries of the world. And so do we. Now that's a little bit difficult to wrap your head around. Wait a second, we've got this sort of, universe that we belong to. How can we step out of it? You are right now in just even conceptualizing how we step out of it. This is a point that not only Heidegger made, but many other people like Hegel, right? Once a limit is established in place, we can conceive of what lies beyond the limit. But Heidegger is saying something a bit different here. So he says, Dasein means being held out into the nothing. Holding itself out into the nothing, he says, Dasein is in each case already beyond beings as a whole. We transcend, every single one of us. We transcend the totality of beings to which we belong, within which we have a long history, in which we are going to keep on finding ourselves. It's not as if transcendence means going off to some other world of beings. No, we sort of go back and forth, out into the nothing and back into the world of beings. And this is an uncomfortable way to be. Anxiety is one of the states in which we experience this. So he says the being beyond beings we call transcendence. If in the ground of its essence, he says, Dasein were not transcending, which now means if it were not in advance holding itself out in the nothing, it could never be related to beings nor even to itself. The fact that we have reflexivity, the fact that we can say things about ourselves like, I'm doing a good job, I'm not doing a good job, I should be spending my time doing this, this is the best use of my time. Any of those sorts of things where we're reflecting upon ourselves or even feeling a mood about ourselves or finding ourselves in the midst of things means that we're already involved in transcendence and the nothing is already there and we are already outside to some degree of the entire world of beings, the entire totality of beings, and introducing something new. Every time that we do that, notice we bring something else into the world of beings. We create some new possibility for ourselves. We do this in particularly through action and through attitudes and through the use of, as he says, our freedom. And he goes on and he says, without the nothing and being held out in the nothing, no selfhood, no freedom. We do so always in relation to an entire universe of beings, of which we are one particular being, and of which the nothing is not a being. But we do so through a kind of freedom that goes beyond the world of, or the totality, or the universe, or the environment of beings, and allows for the introduction of something else. We don't even want to say necessarily something new, because that lays too much of a stress on novelty. It could be the fact that I do the same thing every single day. All right, let's wake up, let's brush our teeth, let's wash our face, let's make some oatmeal. All right, do it again, do it again, do it again. The fact that I am doing that already involves being held out into the nothing, even when we're engaged in what seems like mere routine. Now, you may say, well, that's more within the world than being held out into the nothing. But this being held out into the nothing is the human condition, according to Heidegger. So this is essential to understanding what it means to be a human being. It turns out that the nothing is inescapable for any metaphysics that will not just talk about the totality of beings other than human being, but the human place within and in relation to the other beings. So how do we do this? By relating ourselves to beings. as beings by what he calls nihilitative behavior, refusals, criticisms, negations, all of those things that introduce distinctions within the whole of being. Even negating in the sense of saying, look, this book is Heidegger and not Hegel. It doesn't seem very negative, but already that act of distinguishing that is involved in human communication already is nihilitative behavior. And we do that on the basis of the nothing and being held out into the nothing. So this is really quite a brilliant thing to point out, that in every action, every decision, every ratification, every choice to go back to routine, we are being held out into the nothing and transcending beings as a whole and introducing our own contribution as what he calls the lieutenant of the nothing. This is what Heidegger sees as at the core of human being, and this is what metaphysics as a type of transcending involves.